Once upon half an eternity ago, it was 2002. In a time when the internet was still considered somewhat new and video games had only just stopped being immediately associated with blocky polygons and pixels, little 10-year-old me stumbled upon something odd, downright mystical in her latest issue of the German Mickey Mouse magazine. An announcement for a video game featuring characters from classic Disney shorts, movies and comics as actors in a grand story that would bring all of them together in a never-before-seen epic involving swords, magic and great drama in the style of shonen anime. That game was Kingdom Hearts. At the time, I had only just begun to become aware of anime as a genre of its own, and JRPGs were still entirely foreign to me. But when the first commercials began airing on TV, I immediately knew that I liked what I saw. This game looked flashy, magical, exciting, and it had Donald Duck with magic powers. I mean, how can you go wrong with that? However, when I finally actually got to play the game, I was quick to realize that this wasn't really as much of a Disney story as I had anticipated. It was its very own beast, its own world with its own rules, characters, arcs, history and philosophy, with the Disney elements just kind of, sort of tacked on as an afterthought. And I loved it. This game was the first video game I ever entirely played through on my own, from start to finish, and was probably my first big obsession that did not involve pretty witches in colorful dresses. Still, there were some elements of the game that would continue to nag and bug me in the back of my head for years whenever I was trying to predict how the story would continue. Like, why did Riku not receive the Keyblade right away if he was always meant to have it from the start? What does Namina mean when she tells Riku that the darkness shouldn't be his enemy? I thought the darkness was evil. Wait, it's not? Then what is it? How's this character connected to the darkness if they're not evil? And why in the world does Mickey need a Keyblade from the realm of darkness? He's the nicest, sweetest, most upbeat... Jesus! Anyway, all these questions and more would continue to bug and confuse me at least to some level for many, many years to come. Until I played Persona. Specifically Persona 4. Like, don't get me wrong, some aspects of Kingdom Hearts' cosmology were gradually covered and explained by the games themselves over the years, but there were always a few things that I just couldn't seem to figure out based on the games alone. It was like I was lacking some kind of special background, like there was some basic philosophies behind it that I was missing. It's actually kind of ironic that I was unable to piece together the whole picture of Kingdom Hearts' underlying concepts and philosophies until I found myself looking into those of an entirely different game series. Still, as early as on my first playthrough of Persona 4, as soon as the word shadows fell, I suddenly found myself thinking, doesn't this all sort of feel familiar?
The darkness.
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 The darkness. The darkness.
Darkness. Darkness.
Darkness. Darkness.
Darkness.
So, we have a game about teenagers who are using the power of their hearts and bonds to oppose the monsters born from the darkness in people's hearts. And I know this has been done one way or another in other games and shows as well, but still, kind of interesting, isn't it? I can tell you with 99% certainty that these similarities have nothing to do with the writers of one series copying from the other, and everything to do with the mindset that these series were written in. It's just that Persona is a tiny tad better at explaining said mindset to the player than Kingdom Hearts is. I think that it was when I started reading into Jungian Psychology for the sake of analyzing Persona 4 for a university paper of mine that things began to fall into place and click for me. Especially when I read into Jung's background. You see, when it comes to Jung's inspirations for his series and writings, you can probably categorize them into three distinct sources. Freudian psychoanalysis, Jung's own background in nature sciences, he studied medicine in Basel, and Jung's extensive interest in religions and philosophies, especially Daoism. And There we are. This is it. The click. Even before I knew Persona, I had already understood that Kingdom Hearts cosmology and worlds, deeply relate to concepts from Daoism. I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? Light is yang, darkness is yin, yin and yang don't exist without each other, two sides of a coin, yada yada yada. Just, I didn't exactly understand what this actually means until I had to look into it because of some reading that I did into Jung. You see, there's this common misconception that yang is good and yin is evil. And that's just wrong. In Daoism, there isn't really a defined concept of good and evil. Rather, yin and yang are more like two extremes of the same thing. Like, the yang of height would be up, while the yin of height would be down. There's nothing evil about either. They just sort of belong together and oppose each other, being concepts that couldn't exist without each other. Like, you wouldn't know what dry means if wet didn't exist, or how it wouldn't make sense to understand what edgy things are if round things didn't exist. That's the whole point of Daoism, the idea that the whole world consists of pairs of extremes that can only be recognized in relation to each other. Like, oh, I don't know, conscious and unconscious maybe? Because that's exactly where Jung applied the ideas of Daoism in his writings. He treated the relationship between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind exactly like that. Two extremes that only exist in relation to each other. And I've come to realize that, intentionally or not, this is also sort of how the Kingdom Hearts series uses their concepts of light and darkness as well. Light here being the conscious and darkness being the unconscious.
Denizens of light, answer this. Why do you hate the darkness?
We don't hate it. It's just kinda scary. But the world's made of light and darkness. You can't have one without the other, 'cause darkness is half of everything. Sorta makes you wonder why we are scared of the dark.
It's because of who's lurking inside it.
See, the idea that light and dark in the Kingdom Hearts universe are just ways of saying good and evil works fine for precisely one game. And then it gets a little more muddled.
Follow the darkness. It'll show you the way to your friends.
Can I face them?
You don't want to?
You know I do. Of course. And I will. With my strength. My dark strength. Darkness!
Yeah, so all of a sudden now we got a main character we're controlling, who's clearly fighting on our side, using the power of darkness. Freely and without it being a sign of his character's decline. Heck, if anything, this scene was a huge step forward in Riku's character development and in bringing out his signature power of the Way to Dawn. And yet I still remember how a lot of players, little 12 years old me included, were quite confused at how this fit into the bigger picture of the darkness that the first game had painted. But well, let's rewind that scene a little, shall we?
So don't run from the light. And don't fear the darkness. Because both will make you stronger.
Make me stronger? Darkness too?
Yeah, strength that's yours. The darkness inside your heart, it's vast and it's deep. But if you can, truly stare into it and never try to look away, you won't be afraid of anything again.
All this time I've tried to push the darkness away.
You've gotta just remember to be brave. Know that the darkness is there and don't give in. If you do that, you will gain strength. The kind that's unlike any other.
That sounds familiar, doesn't it? Well, given that you've played Persona 4 at least.
I knew it wasn't lying. I was so ashamed that I didn't want to admit it. You're me, and I'm you. When you get down to it, all of this is me.
That's right. The way Riku accepting his own darkness is treated is pretty much exactly the same how the Persona games treat the matter of accepting one's shadow right down to the detail. Which would make the power of darkness that Riku uses and struggles with throughout the entire series his own unconscious psyche. Specifically his urges, his impulses, his instincts, his selfish desires and needs, all that good stuff. The moment you start looking at the matter this way, rather than the darkness just being his inner evil, it makes sense why Namine tells him to make use of it. Because all of these unconscious drivers, while dangerous if unrestrained, are still part of who we are. They're necessary for us to live, they fuel our desire to keep living and our ambitions. Very much like how in Persona 3, people whose shadows are removed from their psyches fall into apathy syndrome. Which, by the way, in and of itself is very similar to how in Burst by Sleep, Ventus goes into a semi-vegetative state after Vanitas, his darkness, is removed from his heart. Or look at how those whose hearts are lost are repeatedly stated to
Falling into darkness.
Now, if we try translating this using our current line of thinking, this would mean surrender yourself to your unconscious urges, your shadow. Suddenly it makes sense that falling into darkness would turn the villains of Kingdom Hearts 1 into mindless berserkers, or that it would take a mind's active willpower and resistance to possession away, doesn't it? Of course, when you're controlled by your unconscious, your ego isn't really the part of you that's running the show anymore. When you're in a state like that, then of course you'd only act like a mindless destroyer and have zero resistance to randomly invading spawns of Xehanort hitching a hike in your body. If we see the active, conscious will of a person as the light, and the unconscious urges as the darkness, similar to how the Persona ability in the Persona series stands for one's self-awareness and the shadow for one's unconscious, then we can understand why exactly Xehanort and all his incarnations are able to take over bodies like they are. By switching off the victims' egos through plunging them into mindless rage or depression and claiming the now empty spot of the conscious mind in charge for themselves. It's not unlike how occasionally characters in the Persona series have been taken over by the wills of their shadows when placed under extreme stress. Though I'd argue that the similarity of people in these situations often receiving yellow gleaming eyes in both series is probably a coincidence. There are other similar points like this as well, where Kingdom Hearts has the Keyblade as an ability of manifest strength of heart that is acquired by resolve. Persona has, well, the Persona. Both of these abilities are also usually related to light, except for some clearly labeled exceptions. In both series, it's made abundantly clear that strong bonds strengthen the power of the heart, and a point is made of it by using it in several different game mechanics. Then there's the Realm of Darkness, a place modeled after the very common, dark archetype of the hopeless underworld. Something Jung clearly related to the collective unconscious. Both the Realm of Darkness and the collective unconscious have shadows and heartless respectively spawn in them, freely and naturally, as these are their natural habitats. It's also mentioned for both of these worlds that they are unhealthy for normal humans to stay in, with the Realm of Darkness slowly corrupting the minds and hearts of those who wander in it unprotected, while the collective unconscious and its subworlds tend to make normal humans physically sick. Heck, both of them even have a place called the Margin located in the rift to the real world. And then, of course, there's Kingdom Hearts itself, the place where all hearts originate and return to, located deep within the deepest depths of darkness. Very easily equated to the Sea of Unconscious, where all human minds begin and return to, located deep within the collective unconscious. These are some of the most straightforward parallels between the games you mind. Another, even more obvious similarity between the two series is the existence of shadows and heartless. Both are beings born from darkness in people's hearts, both are said to attack people instinctively, both are said to be drawn to other strong darknesses, both can apparently be controlled with such darkness, and both generally act like mindless instinct-driven beasts. The one obvious difference between them is that if a Heartless is created in Kingdom Hearts, the original person disappears, perhaps leaving a nobody as another half, if at all. In Persona, on the other hand, an escaping shadow will either kill the host or leave them with apathy syndrome. The possibility of people actually becoming their shadows is only rarely, if at all, brought up, and we have yet to see a case of it that has lasted for longer than one battle followed by acute demonic possession. Likewise, Persona doesn't really have an equivalent to Kingdom Hearts Nobodies because, well, apathy syndrome. I get to use the term a lot today. The explanation for this difference is that, aside from the case of Ventus and Vanitas, about which I could make a whole video on its own, Kingdom Hearts treats the Heartless far more as a collective threat than something related to the individual, thus eliminating the need for the Heartless and its original to directly face off like a shadow and its host would. Which brings us to the one big difference between Kingdom Hearts and Persona, the reason why, despite all these similarities in cosmology, the two game series don't actually feel all that similar, let alone connected. Even if the game's themes and motives and even their ideas can be very similar, they do have very different approaches to getting them across. First of all, there's the obvious difference in setting, but this is actually only part of a much bigger distinguishing feature between the two series, one that might have to do with the different origins. Kingdom Hearts is a crossover between Disney and Final Fantasy, makes heavy use of motifs and storytelling tropes that are common in fantasy, in fairy tales, nursery tales. In fact, a huge chunk of important background story for the games is delivered in form of a good night tale for Kairi by her grandmother in the first game. Because this is what Kingdom Hearts is at the core, a fairy tale. A long, extremely complex, sometimes very frustrating fairy tale. And then we got Persona, a spin-off of Shin Megami Tensei, which itself spun off from a novel series, a sci-fi novel series. And regardless of how removed Persona has become from these roots by now, they can really still be felt. Persona doesn't treat itself as a fairy tale. It treats itself as a novel, both in terms of dialogue and narrative tactics. The stories are urban, the characters are modern day and recognizable as people of all societies, the narratives clearly relate to issues the players themselves might have encountered in their everyday lives, and make no effort to disguise or distort them to fit in any less defined setting. This is a far cry from the characters of Kingdom Hearts, who are either citizens of secluded, highly symbolic islands, or members of steampunk societies, or Disney. We can relate to them, yes, but usually not as directly as we do relate to the characters in the Persona games. In a way, you could say that Kingdom Hearts is a fairy tale as it could be told in the Persona universe, but the two universes could never exist within each other. Or maybe they can, I don't know. Dream Drop Distance put the wall dance with you in Kingdom Hearts, so why not? Wait, but if Kingdom Hearts is a fairy tale in the Persona universe, but Persona could possibly be a world within the Kingdom Hearts universe, meaning that a fairy tale of the universe exists within part of that universe and... I made my brain hurt. And I didn't even need to bring up a Kingdom Hearts relationship chart to do it. Go me!